Hello, everybody. It is Tuesday, the 30th of December. I want to talk about healing the wounds of the cross because we are a wounded species. We are an abused species, and that abuse has happened on the highest level. It was done by spiritual wickedness, people that had knowledge and used that knowledge in the wrong way to have dominion for themselves, not in service to humanity, but to enslave humanity. Before I talk about this, I want to talk about a couple of other things that came to me yesterday. First of all, because I will read from Luke in a minute. The books of the Bible itself and also the Kabbalion. We don't know who's written these things. We don't know who's written the Kabbalion. There's no name put to that. And that a lot of those books were written a long time after Jesus was in this world. Right. The reason for that, I would say, and the reason for that is in the Kabbalion, is that there was never a written down knowledge. But it was a knowledge that was orally passed on from master to student, or from teacher to student. And the word itself is another thing. For a lot of times, the word itself is only the tool that will lead to the knowledge. The knowledge is within. And the knowledge is not spoken word, it is being, it is experiencing. So, no, they did not write down the knowledge. Until, and I think this is what happened, why we find these books, why these books were buried, apart from the ones in the Bible that were obviously carried on with an intention to be used in doctrine, in teaching, again, a spiritual falsehood. But I think the other texts were buried because, as I said, it is oral tradition, in which case the person needs to be in this world to pass the knowledge on. And when they were at a time where their knowledge was destroyed, and hence they themselves were destroyed, that they foresaw a time when there would be nobody there to pass the knowledge on orally. There would be nobody there maybe on a level anymore to listen to it and to understand it, to find the truth within themselves. So they buried the knowledge. They wrote it down and they buried it so that somebody might dig it up and understand at some point. So, the Kabbalion itself, it says itself, it gathered the knowledge and put it in one book. That is a Hermetic knowledge. That is the first knowledge because it was not written down either. It was oral teaching. And what they said in the Kabbalion, was that there was no place where all the knowledge was written down, but there was references to the knowledge in all the teachings that sprang from it, all the branching out from that point, all the different ways they went with that knowledge. So I expect what they did was look through all the other teachings and just saw the core elements that they all had in common, which was then the Hermetic knowledge. And they wrote that down as the master key, as the foundation for everything else. Right. And there's something else that I read in the Kabbalion yesterday, and it is what I've said for the longest time. Now, I don't know if I've read I've had this book, for a long time. And I don't know that I've read it before, like all the way through. So I don't know whether what I was saying, I said because I read it here and then forgotten that I've read it, or it was a point that I reached myself. Because if it is truth, again, truth is in everybody. Everybody can reach that point. It does not have to be given, it's within you to start with. Because when I read it now yesterday, the words didn't seem familiar. It doesn't feel like I had read it before. Now, what they were actually saying and what I'm reading against all the time is, the Kabbalion says that it would be folly to say that this is not reality. Yeah? It is the polarity again of two things. There is the material and then there is the spiritual. Yeah? But those that say this is not real, but only the higher levels exist as reality, that would be folly. And what it leads to is, they say it leads to people walking around like in a dream. Yeah? No longer attached to the material reality. And he said that is a folly, the Kabbalion says that is a folly that will destroy them. And that is exactly what I've said. They're sitting around with a spaced-out grin on their face, proclaiming this is not real, when all the evidence speaks against it. And it makes them absolutely detached from solid reality. No longer recognizing what is happening in solid reality. Yeah? The Kabbalion says we do live on this plane. We have our being on this plane, and that will not change. We must recognize that this is not the only plane of existence, that there are others, and we can shift into those other planes. Well, they don't say shift, I'm saying shift. But it will always remain that we are here and now in the solid. So really the higher laws, the higher knowledge is there to transmute the lower knowledge. It is there in service to the lower, which is precisely what Jesus did and what other healers did. They use higher knowledge to change the lower by the power of the Spirit, by the power of the knowledge. Because what is in the higher will show itself in the lower. The lower is the outcome of the higher. And if the higher changes, the lower must change. It must be. So now let me come to the healing of the cross, the wounds of the cross. What actually happened in that story. I mean, those that go in there as a historical book, as, when strange things happen in there, they try to explain it in some material way. Yeah, the body of Jesus was gone out of the tomb, so therefore somebody came and lifted the body. Jesus looked different after the resurrection, therefore there was a different guy there. That is people that have understanding purely on the spirit, on the material level, and I really don't know what they're doing in this book. They're not seeking any higher knowledge, and I don't know what they're doing in this book. Yeah, I'm a historian, then go to a historical text. This is not a historical text. This is a spiritual text. Right. So it was the working of the highest knowledge, bringing heaven to earth, creating changes in the spirit that will translate into changes in the physical, because they are not separate from each other. Because they are not separate from each other. That was the Hermetic knowledge. So, Jesus did that. I mean, Jesus did it before the cross. He was a healer. Yeah? And there are accounts of that in this book. Again, do you believe on the power of the Spirit? Or do you think those were just fairy tales? If you think they were just fairy tales, get out of this book. It's not for you. It is for the seeker of truth, for the seeker of higher knowledge. Again, then you must in the first instance say, this is real. Because if it isn't, what are you doing? What are you even doing? So Jesus achieved a transmutation from, again, changing something from one thing into another. The transmutation happened on the level of spirit. It translated into the flesh, which is why he looked different afterwards. And if you understand this principle behind this story, then he absolutely must have looked different afterwards. If he hadn't, there would have been something wrong. If the spirit changes into another state of being, i.e. he said, I become like my Father, that is a being out there somewhere, I become spiritually like them. So what was resurrected was a different being, and therefore it should have looked different from the one before. It makes perfect sense. But as I said, the material will say, well, it was just a different person, because they do not believe that anything else could happen. And he was in the flesh. And let me just read this passage from Luke. Again, this was written down long after Jesus died by people. And it was buried. Because I would say they were in a sect somewhere. And I say that they were not one big united church. They weren't. They were little groups that were working this knowledge, reaching different outcomes. So, and I say little groups are vulnerable, especially in that time of that was going on, that in the time of the destruction of that knowledge. So again, if they knew, they would be destroyed. There would be nobody left in this world of this group to orally pass this thing on, as it should have been. Only to those that were ready to hear. That's the other thing. It was only supposed to be meant to be passed on to those that were on a level where they were ready to hear, grown up enough to handle it. They were about to be destroyed. They wanted the knowledge to stay in the world, so they wrote it down and they buried it. And yeah, I think it was dug up by babes again. Those that were not ready to receive the knowledge. They're doing all sorts of things with it, out of material desire only. Still, digressing. This is what Luke says again after the resurrection, and to those that say, oh, Jesus was spirit when he came back. No. That is the point. He was not spirit. That was the entire point. There was a transmutation. That is the point of the teaching. It was done. That is what the teaching says. We've achieved it. We've done it. So in Luke 24, starting at verse 37, that is when he comes to them, to the disciples, after the resurrection, yeah? And it says, but they were terrified and afraid and supposed that they had seen a spirit. Again, they believed it was spirit, that they were having a vision, yeah? And then he says unto them, why are ye troubled? And why do thoughts arise in your hearts? Behold my hands and my feet, that it is I myself. Handle me. See, for a spirit has no flesh and bones, as ye see I have. He says this in other parts. He says this to Thomas. Put your hand into the matter if you don't believe. I am solid. That's the whole point of the teaching. He was solid flesh. When he has that spoken, he shewed them his hands and feet, and while they yet believed not for joy and wonder, he said unto them, Have you here any meat? And they gave him a piece of broiled fish and of an honeycomb, and he took it and ate it before them. He sat down and he ate before them. Again, does a spirit eat? That's the whole point. It was the power of the Spirit leading to a resurrection. Now, and that is what Jesus said is within us. That is what they're trying to suppress. That is the knowledge we should resurrect within ourselves. The knowledge of ourselves on a higher level. Not to live in that level, but to work it. To bring heaven to earth. Again, that was the point. But I want to talk about the way of the cross now at the end. And hopefully you have some understanding of what it is we're talking about. The way of the cross is hailed to us as salvation. Yeah? It is where everything will be good. We transmute. We become like that other being. We enter into the kingdom of that, into the reality of the other being, which was the ascension in the end. And everything will be good. Yeah? And we've been shown the hope of the resurrection of the flesh. Yeah? So, Jesus worked the knowledge in the world before, healing the sick, resurrecting dead at that time as well. But as I said, there seems to be a time limit on that, something like 3.5 days. Spiritual is still better than a defibrillator. I wouldn't fancy your chances with that after 3.5 days, but there's still a time limit. The problem, I think, is that once a person is healed, corruption will start again. Once a person is resurrected, he will start to die again. It will always happen. The natural process will start again. And maybe it was the desire for the process to stop completely. To be in one flesh and to remain in that flesh for all eternity. Again, think about it. Would that actually be what you want? Be the same person all the time? I mean, eternity is a very long time. Still, that may have been the thought or the idea, if you can take the knowledge that far. So again, Jesus healed, first of all, changed the flesh by the power of the Spirit, changed the energy, changed the picture, because they are one. The Spirit and the flesh are one. So healing was there, resurrection of the dead was there. And here is the point that I think many miss, and that is utmost important, to me, of utmost importance. So he was resurrected. Apparently they were told that this was it. The flesh was now incorruptible. Again, was that truth? He was no longer in this world after the ascension. Yeah, I mean, again, this is something where we need to go into belief and trust and that was truth. But there's another point there that is very important. Let me get to this point now. His wounds had not healed. That is a very important point that this story tells you. He went through the transmutation into another being, no longer human, in flesh maybe, but definitely not in spirit. And his wounds had not healed. That way of transmutation into another being does not heal our wounds. It did not heal the wounds of the cross. And if he's really eternal now, he will have those wounds for eternity. Think about that. Now, if you were to point that out, again, here they do come to you with, oh, you know, your puny mind cannot understand what happened there. And they come and bamboozle you with words, you know, trying to explain, bend over backwards, tie themselves into a knot, trying to explain why those wounds were still there, and probably using very big words while they're doing it, and then telling you you're just stupid because you don't understand. Because that's what they do. And here it is again. If you see it on the material level with your material eyes, you see the truth. You see the spirit by what it creates. You see the outcome, the solid outcome. And if the wounds are still there, then the wounds are still there, and that is a knowledge. Maybe only seen on the material, you will have to reason further up again to see why the wounds are there. That's probably something we should do. But the fact remains, he was not healed. His wounds were not healed. That way did not lead to the healing of his wounds. And that is the truth that is in that story on the material level. It did not heal the wounds of the cross. It led to a transmutation and resurrection, but it did not lead to healing. And then it should be very clear to us, that is, again, back to the beginning, if we are a wounded species, a species that is hurting, that has received wounds through spiritual wickedness, then the way of the cross, the way of denial of self, the way of transmutation into another being, that way will not heal us. And that is clearly what that text says. Even on the material level, that is the truth. That way will not heal us, is what that text says. Again, you're not supposed to think about it, you're not supposed to reason about it, and if you understand it on the material level, they tell you you know nothing. That is not the truth. You see it on the material level, that is the truth. There is a higher level that created that truth, but the outcome is the truth. There is no separation. And again, to deny the material, say it's not real, we all must go into the spiritual, then you're not seeing the truth. And that is exactly why they are leading people into the denial of the material, because there the truth is shown, the fruit of the Spirit is shown, the truth is shown, and they don't want people to see. So they divert their intention all the way out there. The truth is out there. The further you go out there, the truer it becomes. There is truth out there. There's truth in the highest level of knowing. There's truth in the lowest level of knowing. And they are the same truth. Only different ways of experiencing it. So, everybody goes, follow Jesus to the cross, the way of obedience, the way of denial of self, and all our tears will be dried and we will live forever. That book says you go that way, you will change, but your wounds will not be healed. That is what it says. Believe or don't. That's up to you. But don't believe a falsehood. to say that is the way to salvation is a falsehood. Right, anyway, said a lot this morning. I hope it made sense, and I leave it at that for now. And I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.